The Derek Chauvin murder trial is well into its second day with more witnesses taking the stand. Chauvin, a former police officer, is charged with murdering George Floyd last May. This is the case that sparked a worldwide movement against police brutality and systemic racism. Lawyers questioned Donald Williams. He called 911 and told them he, quote, he believed he witnessed a murder. We also heard from a witness identified as DF. She's the high school student who filmed Floyd's final moments. Because of her age, the court decided not to show her face. Here's what she said when asked to recount the violence she saw that day.
What did you hear or see Mr. Floyd doing while he was being restrained underneath, as you described, the knee of Mr. Chauvin?
He was complaining about, he was stating that he was in pain. He said his neck, his back, everything hurts. I can't breathe. Mom, he said I would get up if I could, something around that. I wouldn't say that's his exact words. But yeah, pretty much he was saying how much in pain he was. He couldn't breathe.
Joining us now is Jenny Roberts. She's the co-director of the Criminal Justice Clinic and professor of law at American University. She's also a former public defender. Jenny, I'd first like to get your opinion on what's happening in the trial. What are the key takeaways from the first half of the proceedings today?
Yeah, so I was teaching criminal law during some of it, but I've caught myself up a little bit. And I think that overall, I would say that the prosecution is doing a pretty good job delivering on both the promises that were made or the case that was laid out during opening statements, but also there's been, it's been extremely difficult and emotional, I think, in a way that the prosecution likely wants to convey. I mean, hearing 18-year-old Daniela Frazier testify that she wished she could have saved the life of George Floyd, and then, you know, we didn't get to see her, but presumably she looked at Derek Chauvin when she then said, but you should have done that. That really picked up on the prosecution's opening statement theme of these police officers were supposed to care as a verb for George Floyd. And so I thought that was highly effective.
Certainly a difficult day for these witnesses to have to relive what they saw, and something I imagine they've been carrying for a year. Jenny, you co-authored an article for NBC News. In it, you emphasize this trial should serve as a, quote, a rallying cry for policymakers to not only change when and how police use force, but also for us as a society to rethink what kinds of arrests are really necessary. Can you elaborate on that and explain what core problem you believe this trial is highlighting?
Yes, so this trial, as well as other tragic cases involving death at the hands of police officers who have approached or are making an arrest for something petty, you know, like selling loose cigarettes, tragically in the Eric Garner case on Staten Island, and too many other examples to name. It highlights that we have in this country what I would call a mass misdemeanor system. So yes, we have mass incarceration. We have more people incarcerated in prisons than anywhere else similar to this country. But we also have mass criminalizations. 1 in 3 adults in the United States has some sort of arrest or conviction record. That's a shocking number. Are we a nation of criminals? I don't think so. And so I don't think that people understand that most cases in our criminal legal system are misdemeanors. Low-level offenses. There are 13 million new misdemeanors each year, arrests made, and there are about 80% of any typical criminal court docket is made up of misdemeanors. So I really think we have to think about that when we think about how many things we put into the criminal legal system. Many of these things are problems that could be and should be solved in other ways, not through the criminal legal system, not through policing. There are many other ways to approach almost all of these issues.
Jenny, I want to continue on the idea you're discussing. George Floyd was under arrest for allegedly using a counterfeit $20 bill, something that is considered a misdemeanor, as you're mentioning. Mm-hmm. However, these low-level crimes, like you're saying, make up the majority of cases in our legal system. How is this mass enforcement creating a public safety problem, and what can be done to resolve it?
Yes. So picking up first on the underlying allegation, and it really was only an allegation, unfortunately will never be, because of his death, unfortunately will never be explored. But I want to pick up on something that the prosecutor, Jerry Blackwell, said during openings, and I'm quoting him. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, what was this all about in the first place? And he says, you're going to learn it's a counterfeit $20 bill used at a convenience store. That's all. You're not going to hear evidence Mr. Floyd knew it was fake, did it on purpose. You'll learn that the police could have just written a ticket. You'll learn that even if he did it on purpose, it was a minor offense, a misdemeanor. And I really, to me, that really stood out in the opening statement, because it just showed, two things. One is we make people, obviously Mr. Floyd, but many other people, less safe when we use this extreme law enforcement approach to misdemeanors. Approaching George Floyd in a car, pulling guns out, dragging him out, kneeling on him, and killing him is an extreme response to an allegation of a low-level offense. It's also a response that affects people differently. So Black people and white people are policed differently in this country. That's firmly established. And I think it's really important to point out that this mass misdemeanor problem is a problem that falls much more heavily on communities of color than it does on white.
Just another question. These jurors are, of course, listening in the courtroom, listening to these witnesses who lived through this on this day. How much do you think the jurors can eliminate the emotion they must feel listening to these witnesses? Is that even possible?
I mean, look, I've been in many courtrooms. I've tried cases. I've watched cases. It's heartbreaking to hear a 9-year-old have to testify about watching a man die in front of her. I mean, I can't imagine that the jurors are able to be completely dispassionate about this. I don't know if we would want them to. That would worry me. Of course, we're all human. Ultimately, they're going to have to decide whether the facts as presented by the prosecution prove every element of every charge beyond a reasonable doubt against Derek Chauvin. And that's going to be the ultimate decision they have to make. How much they're affected by the passion of the witnesses or the tragedy of the situation is just sort of natural human reaction to the things they're hearing.
It all comes down to those 12 humans, as you say. Jenny, thanks for squeezing us in between teaching and watching the trial.
Thank you very much.